The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon to all our listeners. Welcome to the first of the two Step Up webinars on self-care. Thank you for taking the time to be a part of it. Today, we are going to present you a short webinar dealing with the burnout syndrome for workers in social services. My name is Katarina Višnar and I will be presenting together with Sandra Bjarnadóttir. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not that proficient in Icelandic language. Okay, thank you very much. I'm trying to get to the next slide. Yeah. This is a short outline of today's agenda. Please take a look at it, and after the presentation, we will take your questions and comments. Let's go now into the technical aspects. You are automatically muted. We will keep the muting on until the end of the presentation, after which you will be able to ask questions. We are not using any sort of video or web cameras in this webinar, so we are not able to see you and you are not able to see us. What you should be able to see is this slide presentation. If you cannot see it, then please simply leave the webinar by clicking the X at the top right of your screen and then rejoin the webinar by clicking the link in your confirmation email. This webinar is being recorded. During the first part, your microphone is automatically muted. If you have any questions during this time, please feel free to type them into the question pane. We will then answer your questions at the end of my presentation. During the questions and answers part, only one person at a time can be unmuted. If you have a question or a comment during that time, please raise your electronic hand and then we will invite you to give us your question or commentary. Lastly, we hope that you will enjoy our webinar. I'm going to give the microphone to Sandra now and get back to you a little bit later.
Thank you, Kat. Occupational burnout is thought to result from long-term, unresolvable job stress that leads to physical and emotional exhaustion, cynicism and detachment, feelings of ineffectiveness and lack of accomplishment. In 1974, Freudenberger characterized burnout by a set of symptoms that include exhaustion resulting from work's excessive demands, as well as physical symptoms such as headaches and sleeplessness, quickness to anger, and closed thinking. He observed that the burned-out worker looks, acts, and seems depressed. However, occupational burnout is not a simple result of long hours. The cynicism, depression, and lethargy of burnout can occur when one is not in control of how they carry out their job, when they're working towards goals that don't resonate with them, and with lack of social support. Burnout doesn't happen suddenly. One does not wake up one morning and have burnout. It is something that happens slowly over time, which makes it very difficult to recognize. Maslach, Schaufeli, and Leiter identified 6 risk factors for burnout: mismatch in workload, mismatch in control, lack of appropriate awards, loss of a sense of positive connection with others in the workplace, perceived lack of fairness, and conflict between values. Burnout is supposed to be a work-specific syndrome. However, this restrictive view of burnout scope has been shown to be groundless. In other words, burnout could apply to non-work roles such as that of a caregiver or student. Workers in the human services, charities, and nonprofits have high rates of burnout. They often have excessively large caseloads with an ever-shrinking resource budget available to assist their clients. This tight budget also forces them to work under the constant fear of downsizing and the potential threat of job loss. Some are subjected to forced overtime, on-call after hours, and other schedule imbalances, which blur the distinction between time at work and time off. They face overwhelming caseload numbers. Some of their clients are violent or otherwise jeopardize their safety. Unrelenting demands upon their time prevent them from taking meal or rest breaks. And and despite working at a frantic pace, their efforts are frequently not appreciated by management or clients. As for the effects of burnout, some research indicates that burnout is associated with reduced job performance, coronary heart disease, and mental health problems. Occupational burnout is also associated with absences, time missed from work, and thoughts of quitting. Following this short introduction, Katarina will talk about burnout syndrome for workers in social services for victims of domestic violence.
Thank you, Sandra. In the second part of this webinar, we are going to share with you a reflection on the issue of burnout, written by our colleague Mihaela Mangu from Romania. What I'm going to do now is read her essay now. It goes like this, quoting, "The activity in social services for victims of domestic violence is very demanding. You need to pay close attention to detail, focus on how to deal with the victim. You need to synthesize information and deliver it to victims according to their level of understanding. You need to predict, as well as be capable of building a barrier between your professional activity and personal life. Each member of the team has its role in working with victims. Each has its own way of applying the tools and procedures of work. From our experience, there are many cases where the victims are looking to establish very close bonds with those employees who seem acceptable to that kind of relationship by the victims. Those who are beginners in such services are typically willing to do everything they can to solve the cases. Consequently, they lose sight of the fact that each beneficiary has their own rhythm, and that we are just their support in the process of solving the problems they face. This is also the moment when you become disappointed if the victim returns to the aggressor or if she does not accept to proceed with an action that you think is important. As the coordinator of the activities, I can say that without having any solid financial support, I consider them exhausting, physically and mentally. I manage 2 victim services, a counseling center and a shelter, which are set up with very, very small funds, with a lot of volunteer work from the collaborators. We need to find the funds for our work. There are also many responsibilities that have arisen along the way towards beneficiaries, employees, and other partners. These include: first, the problems arising during the development of services. Second, the new employees trying to adapt. Third, the search of each person during the process of identifying with the organization. That can sometimes lead to conflicts. Fourth, the demands of the employees who face shortcomings, but there are no concrete solutions. All these lead to exhaustion for the coordinator or for other persons in charge. What should we do not to consume our energy on small things, and how to focus on what is important, and how to find concrete solutions and how to implement them? These are questions to which many of us need answers and a strong support from specialists. As social workers working with victims of domestic violence, we are daily exposed to the trauma of the people we work with. The latest neuroscience studies show that when you empathize with a person reporting a traumatic situation, the brain of the specialist activates the same circuits that are present in the brain of the recipient, which in a colloquial language translates into feeling the pain of the other. Empathy is a key tool in working with beneficiaries, both for the creation of the professional-client relationship that is extremely important, as well for the intervention in specific cases. This exposure through empathy, unmanaged, and in the absence of the self-contact of the specialist, can lead to the feeling of the client's negative emotions as if it were his own emotions. The specialist may feel emotionally charged, and it is important that he or she expresses their own emotions, thoughts, and experiences after social counseling. In this situation, it is often helpful to have a consolidated, cohesive, strong team at work, people with similar abilities that can help with emotional ventilation, because specialists are humans too. Without this support network, specialists can express the burnout syndrome. Another problem is the ethical perspective. We cannot discuss our cases that we work with. We cannot tell our life partners about what is happening in the workplace. And if this happens, it is, from my point of view, too big a demand, since our partners, they did not necessarily study social work or psychology, so they may lack skills to handle such situations. They also lack knowledge from a scientific point of view about the behavior of people from different social categories, which involve specific characteristics and needs. So this was the end of her essay. And from here on, we would like to invite you to a discussion. We will move to the questions and discussion part now. And we will start with the question we received via email, which was sent by Silvia Menecali, since it seems to be something for the whole of the audience. Her question was, do you know any cases of mobbing or bossing in social work as a consequence of a burnout syndrome? For example, in contexts where there is no supervision or other support services for social workers. So that would be a question, I guess, for the whole audience. Yes, since Sylvia is here, we can unmute her. No. Self-muted. Okay, so that was her question. Are there any questions in the question pane? Are there any comments? Have you got any other questions? Okay. Yeah. So electronic hand was raised by Eugenia Benini. You are now unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay. Hello. Hello. I'm sorry, I joined the webinar just 5 minutes ago. I don't know if you mentioned it already, but it would be interesting to hear some recommendations on how to avoid or to address burnout when it is already happening, let's say. So
yes,
of course, personally, I know some of them, but it would be very interesting to hear it from you.
Mm-hmm. This is actually what we planned for the next part of the webinar. For today, we only wanted to introduce the question and maybe just give a few some exchange between us and our listeners, but specifically we're going to devote the next webinar to that. Although there will be, I think, since it seems to be quite an issue, we might also follow up in the next year with our webinars. Because it seems to be quite a thing for everyone. So we are planning this for the next Wednesday, the 6th of December, to discuss and that will also only be one part of the thing, because we won't be going into supervision. That will be something else then. So would you be able to join us then next week?
I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope so.
And if not, then you can always listen to the recording of the webinar.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. I wouldn't want to go into detail, because then next week we don't have anything to talk about.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
I hope. I thank you for understanding.
Yes. Sure.
Thank you. Okay, we have another electronic hand by Anna Rita Ronzoni. Hello.
Yeah.
Hello,
Hi.
welcome.
Hi. Good
Nice.
evening, everybody.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, same here. Yeah. So I'm calling you from Jordan,
Uh-huh.
where I work. Yes, where I work for the International Rescue Committee, and we do provide case management, psychosocial support for Syrian women refugees. So same here. The question, and I will be willing to attend next week to better understand the strategies that we can put in place to prevent burnout of our counselors, and yes, to address burnout when it's there. And also my question is how much the cultural factors, considering that I am speaking here from a country where most of our beneficiaries are of Muslims, and not only Muslim, but also coming from another country. So this reflection can be done like in Europe, having immigrant women or women coming from another cultural background. How much cultural factors along with the gender-based factors can impact the burnout while we do provide the service?
Well, if you would allow me, I will note this down and try to find something to reply to it by the next week. I must say, that's a very surprising question for me right now. I wouldn't know what to say, but I'm happy to ask if anybody else attending the webinar right now would be able to say something about how much the cultural context influences the issue of burnout.
Yes, yeah. I mean, again, in this case, it's very specific, but also I'm thinking about when we do serve immigrant women or women victims of trafficking in Europe, for example, how much sometimes the cultural distance or not knowing the culture of the survivors may impact also the burning out.
Yes. I'll try to find the answer to that. Right now, I mean, thank you for a question. It's definitely a very interesting one. But if would you be okay with follow up next week?
I'll try my best to be there.
Yes. I mean, if any of the listeners has any kind of input, that would be very, very helpful right now. So we got one written input from Estonia. It's Piletsop Pagan. She said that in Estonia there is quite a lot of being silent about our own problems and working way too much. So if there is no supervision, no supervisor looking over staff, burnout is very common. So having a supervision is something that apparently that they find very, very helpful. Thank you very much for your input, Pila. Yes, okay, let's... yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes. It's you again. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Well, I can speak about my experience in Ukraine, working with women's organizations in Ukraine, and that's not, I mean, religiously it's not different, and not very different from Western Europe, and culturally also it's not very different. So in Jordan or in other countries, I think the difference could be even more marked. But I will just speak from my experience, and I could see that with the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, women's NGOs had to redirect their work from, for example, combating violence against women to providing humanitarian aid, and still continuing to their work on combating violence against women. And also living in a culture where gender equality is not very developed, like, I don't know, in Nordic countries, they had a triple or 4 times as much as a burden. So I think the issue of gender equality, which varies from culture to culture and country to country, is really important in very influential, has a very big impact on burnout as well. I mean, it happens in peace times and in developed countries, even more so in less developed countries.
Thank you. Yeah,
I think, or countries affected by war, yes, or refugee flows.
Yeah. So would you say that like feminism would help?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we know very well that even in I don't know, in Nordic countries. I am from Italy, and I see this very much in Italy, that since women, you know, when they do time use surveys, women tend to spend a lot more time, like 3-4 hours per day, more with domestic work or taking care of children, and they don't have enough, for example, now I can't remember the word in English, but nursery homes for very young children, very small children from 1 to 3 years old, for example. So these are very key issues that affect people, burnout in general. And then if you zoom into the situation of social workers or psychologists that deal with survivors of violence or trafficking, I think this is even more the case. So yeah, I think gender equality is very important, but it's not the only issue. I mean, this is a more structural and bigger issue. Then you have the more technical issues, like having a supervisor or a psychologist within the organization that tries to support the counselors and the managers as well. I think the managers need the support.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. That was very interesting to hear. Have we got more questions? Okay, we'll wait for a little while if you come up with more questions or maybe comments, or okay, if there are no more comments right now, then we'll just go on to the outro, to the last slide. If you can get there, yes. No, this is one before last. Can you just click it on here? Yeah. Okay. So since there are no more questions at this point, we would like to thank you for your time, for sharing your experiences and knowledge, and for the short but interesting discussion. We hope that the exchange of information was helpful for you. Don't forget that we will be following today's webinar with the second part, which has the title "The Ecology of Self-Care," and it will take place next Wednesday, 6th of December, at 1:00 p.m. CET, Central European Time. So 1:00 or 13 o'clock CET. To follow up this webinar, we will be sending out a link with the edited webinar as well as the PowerPoint presentation by the end of next week. Thank you for your attendance, and we wish you a wonderful rest of this day.